So one of the oldest tricks in the book, a straight tail worm. It's a worm that's been around forever. It seems to get passed on throughout generations for good reason, because it catches fish. It's extremely versatile, and I remember back when I first started, it was one of the first baits that I picked up, and I didn't know too many ways to rig it, but it caught fish and it got me going, and it was just an awesome bait to go throw around, and I could throw it around a lot of different scenarios. Because there's so many different types of straight tail worms on the market, I got two kinds here that cover pretty much the basis of your typical straight tail worm, and I got a terminal box filled with everything we need. So let's see what we can come up with for different ways to rig the straight tail worm. So I'm going to start off with one of the rigs that I'm most familiar with, and that's the Texas rig. I remember when I was younger, this is probably what got me into the whole world of bass fishing, was just the simple Texas rigged worm. And there's a lot of things that can be done with the Texas rig. I can put a weight in front of this and I can flip it through thick weeds, or I can leave it weightless like this and work it across the surface over thick weeds or through lily pads. So I can do a lot of different things just with a couple different style hooks depending on the worm. If it's a bigger worm, you might want to go with a little bit bigger hook or an EWG, or stick with a typical worm, just a straight worm hook like this. It all depends the worm that you're using and what your scenario is. Now another awesome way to rig this style of worm is with a Wacky Rig. Just like the Texas rig, this is a super versatile way to fish this worm. Again, it's another bait where when you're up shallow, almost any shallow cover, it's going to pull through super well and get fish to bite. So in looking at the underwaters, you can really see what makes this bait so effective. It really just likes to shimmy down, and when you pull back up, it just comes straight up because of your pull point is right in the middle of the worm. So you're just pulling right through the cover and it falls right back down through the cover. And since it's so light, it doesn't really get the chance to bury itself in all the deep weeds or whatever you're throwing it around. Along with the weightless Wacky, a few companies out there offer a style of Wacky hook that comes weighted. And this provides a subtle difference between the weightless Wacky, because with the fall, it can fall a little bit quicker. So whether you want to fish this a little bit faster up shallow or on a deeper weed line or some deeper rocks, this just gives you a little bit different option compared to the weightless Wacky. Another simple yet effective way to rig this worm is on either a shaky head or a jig worm. And both of these styles have a time and a place, whether you're fishing a round cover or very sparse cover or even clean bottom. They both are very effective ways to just throw a worm out and catch bass. So whenever you're fishing a little bit deeper bottom, or if it seems like the bass are just wanting to feed down, the shaky head is a great option, especially when fishing out deeper. It's an awesome bait because you can throw it a long ways and really pull long, cover a lot of water, and really pick apart your spot and cover it well. So I have a worm, a hook, a nail weight, and an O-ring. And these are all the components to a Nico rig, or a Neko rig, however you prefer to call it. And there's many reasons why I like throwing this. Now, it's a newer bait, so not a lot of people are throwing it, and this also provides a super unique look. When you're watching the underwaters of this bait, the way it pulls through and the way it hops along, the way that the tail looks, just everything about it, it just looks different. So a big part of the Nico rig is the weight that's on the bottom. And nowadays there's a lot of different options of weights that you can do. There's half moon like I have here, there's nail weights, weights with skirts, you name it. There's a lot of different options to really customize and personalize how you want to fish it. And all of that just comes with trial and error and personal use to see what you prefer and what works best for whatever scenario you're in. So one of the newer trends in the bass fishing world that's really proving to be a true fish catcher is the Tokyo rig. And an awesome thing about the Tokyo rig is that you can do a lot with it. You can drag it, you can flip it, you can do all sorts of things. It comes in and out of cover really well, goes down the weeds, comes back up really well. It's a really good bottom indicator too. With the weight right on bottom, you get contact right with what the bottom is, and you know exactly what you're fishing, whether it's hard bottom, soft bottom. So that's a really cool thing about it. And also, you have the ability to change your weight. So if you're fishing a little bit shallower, you can go to a smaller weight, or if you're fishing deep weeds or rocks, you can go to a heavier weight if you're dragging around or whatever you need it for. So here I have the standard Tokyo rig, rigged with a big bull worm, and this is a big meaty worm. So this EWG on this standard Tokyo rig fits this worm perfectly. And although this hook might not work for different worms, that's what's awesome about the Tokyo rig lineup, is that VMC actually has different hook styles on their different Tokyo rigs. And there's anywhere from flipping hooks to worm hooks, to this one here, which is the Finesse Nico hook on a Texas rig. And what's awesome about this, I can Texas rig it like I have here, which pulls through cover really well. I can nose hook it if I want to fish around a little bit more sparse cover, or I can even wacky rig it if I want to fish a little bit slower. So it allows me to do a lot just with one worm and give it a really unique look that is not really thrown a whole lot. And then there's a drop shot, which is arguably one of the most deadly ways to present a worm to bass. And with the drop shot, another thing to consider too is the different weights and especially the different hooks. Whatever hook fits you best or you have the most comfort in is probably going to work with this rig. So those are some of the ways to rig a straight tail worm, all the way from the tried and true to some of the newer tactics that are starting to hit the market. And it all came from just one terminal box, which really shows you how versatile a straight tail worm can be. And it's really a bait that ever since I was young, I've been going to, still to this day, it's still catching fish for me. I know there's probably a couple other oddball ways out there to rig a worm, but these are some of my favorite ways that are my go-to when I need to go catch a bass.